This is HRH on BBC2, and you're watching Spike Night. Coming up next, Spike in his own words, in which the great man talks about his life from childhood until the present. One thinks one makes quite a good televisual presenter, doesn't one? I wonder if one year Mumsy wouldn't mind me presenting one of her Christmas specials. Think so? I'll ask her.
How did your father and mother meet, Spike?
They met in India, in a Catholic church. She was singing in the choir, and he heard her singing, and they fell in love with her voice. And they stayed together.
So tell me about your father. Are you your father's son?
Yeah, I certainly am, yes. He was a great father, quite witty. He woke me up at 3 o'clock one morning and said, "Wake up, son." So I said, "What is it, Dad?" He said, "Listen, I've never shot a tiger." I said, "Why tell me?" He said, "I've got to tell somebody."
Well, that was his theatricality coming out, wasn't it? What sort of act did he do?
He's a step dancer and a singer.
He did an act with your mother too, didn't he, at one point?
Yes, yes. He made her call herself Gwenny Gordon. And they used to do shows in between bioscopes. There'd be a film on, and when they came to an end, they'd go on and do a turn. Buck and wing dancer, they used to call himself. American buck and wing dancer.
Where did he learn that? Do you know?
At Stedman's Academy in London. Dance Academy. Of course, he wanted to go on the stage very badly. Their house faced the stage door of the Queen's in Poplar, and he'd see all these people arriving in Landaus, all these Florrie Fords and all those people, and he fell in love with the stage, but unfortunately his parents put him in the bloody army at 14.
But because it was the more dignified thing to do, presumably, to be killed rather than
to... a complete lack of Irish vision.
The thing that puzzles me is how he was allowed to spend so much time performing when he was in the army.
In the army, you see, the troops were very short of entertainment. So father was at a bargain for time off to rehearse the show. That's how it happened, yes.
That meant that he was away from home a lot while you were growing up. And did you feel those absences had an effect on you?
I used to wet the bed. And I think that was it.
Did your mother not compensate in any way? Or...
No, she is quite a tough cookie, my mother. A bit nervous, a bit hysterical.
So you weren't drawn closer to her?
No, it was my grandmother that I was close to. I worshipped her. Margaret Florida Burnside. I was thinking of her putting me to bed when I was 5, and she used to sing me French songs. Clara de la luna, la da 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 da. And then there's my tall, dignified grandfather, trumpet sergeant major Alfred Henry Kittleband, and I actually still have his sword, which he carried at the Battle of Isalawana. Who's heard of the Battle of Isalawana? It was during the Zulu Wars, and the troops assembled, and they mounted a sort of a hill, and they set out the battlefield, which was flat. Then suddenly, the rim of the hills became black with impis, all chanting, Bayayati, Bayayati, Bayayati. And they streamed down the gondolas onto the flat, and they formed the Zulu Horns and started to encapsulate the British troops. The British troops took them on, but suddenly a disaster. They ran out of ammunition, and there were no screwdrivers to open the boxes. Of course, it was a massacre. My grandfather escaped with 13 others, and he was listed as having escaped. And that was a disaster. That was the Battle of Isalawana. And I was in Africa last time, and I went to see Gary Player, who had a Zulu manservant. And I happened to mention to Gary Player that my grandfather was at the Battle of Isalawana. And he told the Zulu, whose father was at the Battle of Isalawana. And as I drove away, he stood on a mount and he shouted the Zulu praise for a son of a warrior to me. And I still ring that sound, those clicks when they talk like that. And he shouted out to me, "You are a son of a warrior." Yeah.
When you were growing up, what did empire mean?
Burning bright sunny days. Burnished soldiers of many colours and many uniforms and many turbans, and the Ulster Rifle in their immaculate white playing silver bugles as we were marching to Georgia. And then there was the Gurkhas with their leopard skin and the drums, the Gurkhas, little pot hats like this. Then the Bengal dancers, then Skinner's light horse, all in yellow, with black horses, looked as if they'd been polished. And then the limber gunners, 18-pounders, with my father driving his horse in front. That's what it was like.
What sort of boy were you?
I was a bit of a tearaway, running around all the time, never still, full of energy. I seemed to run everywhere. In fact, I nearly ran out of India at one time.
Did you have toys as such?
Yes. Mickey Donkey used to be my favourite toy, and I cannot believe that my parents ever separated him from me, because I yearn for him still. I used to have him in my bed. He used to sit next to me when we were in the gharry.
Why did they take him away from you?
I never understood the indifference of adults to childhood memories. They seem to let them go, and the memorabilia which goes with them. Like I've got things hanging up around here. And this is one complete shelf of my children's presents to me, little presents they made at Christmas. I have a pair of red shoes which my daughter wore and thought important enough to wear to bed. She wore them in bed. That's a true love, isn't it? True love, yes.
Your father had a fascination for the Wild West. Did he indoctrinate you in that?
Yes, he did. I knew about Billy the Kid and Wild Bill Hickok and Daniel Boone when I was about 8, and he was mad about guns and cowboys. He'd always carry 2 pistols in a holster with him, even if he's dead safe, you know. He's a pretty good shot. He shot this buck, and we've got a picture of him actually skinning it. I didn't like it, though. I was present at a cantonment dog shoot and they had to shoot all the pariahs. And there was this black dog, and he shot it, and he obviously broke its back because it lay down, and when he went like that to it wagged its tail. And I said to put it out of its misery. So he did. He shot it in its head. But that dog with its back broken, wagging its tail. That's an indelible mark on my mind.
Your father was discharged from the army in the early 30s and the family returned. What are your recollections of that period?
Well, I remember my mother saying to me, when you go to England, you can get chocolate and cream for twopence. I never saw any chocolate or bloody cream for twopence. But that was her vision of it.
How would you describe the difference between the good life in India and what you found in Catford?
Well, abominable. We were closed into this one room. And there's a double bed where my mum and dad used to sleep, and a gas stove in the same room. The good life was over.
I always got the feeling that your childhood had been taken away from you before it had properly ended.
Yes, I'd like to have gone to university. The best education I had was under the brothers. They were stimulating it. I remember when I started getting hot and bothered about girls, and I went to see one of these brothers, and said to him, "Father, do you ever think of women?" He said, "All the time." That was Jesuits.
At least he was honest.
Yeah.
Now, one of your first jobs, I believe, was in a laundry.
I used to wash all the shitty sheets that used to be laundered for Lewisham Hospital.
Literally shitty sheets.
Yeah, shitty sheets. People have shit them, and we had to put them in this huge colander with washing powder and make it go round and round and bring it out, yes.
The plus side must have been that the laundry brought you into contact with the opposite sex. Did the girls there tease you?
Yes, they did. I was pretty good looking. I didn't realise it at the time. I didn't take advantage of it. Yes, they did. They used to tease me all the time. Yeah.
So tell me of the first love of your life.
I met her. I was working at Straker's as a salesman. We used to catch the train from London Bridge. And this girl took a fancy to me, Lily Dunford. God, she was beautiful. She had lovely legs, everything. And there was no room in the carriage. She said, "I'll sit on your lap." That was the first contact. And from then on, she became my first sweetheart. And I was mad about her. And she wanted to marry me, but I didn't have any money. And she went off with me, and I went on carrying the torch for her. All the time I was in the army, I kept writing her. She married twice after that. She died of cancer recently. I went to her grave, ever faithful.
Can you remember what you were doing, Spike, on the day war was declared?
I was cutting the grass in the garden. And then Chamberlain came on the radio and said, it's from 11 o'clock today. We are at war with Germany. I love that "we" bit. Yes, he was a fool, wasn't he? And then another man came. We will fight them on the beaches, yeah. I met him.
You did?
Yeah. There was a rumour going around. I was in the army now. And there's a rumour going around that German paratroopers were coming ashore with cheese cutters and cutting the heads off sentries. So I was watching very carefully that night, looking over the camera, and I heard some noise down to the left, and I said, "Halt, who goes there? Advance, friend or foe, be recognised." And they came up the path, and it was General Alexander and Churchill. And I said, "This is ridiculous, and can I see your identity?" And he gave it to me. Yeah, Churchill. And he said, "Now then, lad, what do you do?" I said, "I'll do my best."
Do you remember the first of your colleagues to die in battle?
Yeah, Lance Bombardier Roberts. He was killed by a shell from our own gun going off at the muzzle. Roberts was bleeding to death from a vein here, and I was trying to press down on it, but I wasn't doing any good. It wasn't stopping it. And bit by bit he became unconscious and said, "The bastards, he thought the Germans had shelled us." Anyhow, he died, but not before he'd written a note to his wife in Liverpool. That was the first one. Lots of others after that, of course.
What did it feel like to be in action with shells falling all around you?
You just ducked all the time like this, and you just held on, John. You just held on. Suddenly they'd drop around you. And I remember being in an OP, and it got dark, and it was my turn to go around the back of this hill to collect our hot meal. And when I was holding it in the canister, I heard this voice say, "C Company, Grenadier Guard, rum ration." So I said, "Over here." So I went and got it, and I took it back to the trench, and we drank it. It was in the carboid, like that. And we just passed it to each other. And apparently during the night there was a terrific counter-attack. Well, we were stoned. Where's gone? And when the men came in the morning to take over from us, said that was a bit of a do last night. So what do? There'd been a German attack. They must have gone through us, you know. Anyhow, it's been on my conscience for years. So I wrote to the officer commanding of the Grenadier Guards, and I said, "Look, this happened on the night of February the 3rd. I knocked off your rum ration from your men, and I think I'd like you to accept the 6 bottles of rum as retribution." So yes, they invited me to lunch. Yeah, very nice, yes.
When were you overtaken by battle fatigue?
On Monte Dimiano. We were carrying supplies in terms of batteries up this steep mountain, and then suddenly the Germans must have spotted us, because they started to drop 3-inch mortars on it at quite a rate. And I said I was the bombardier in charge of the party. So I said, "Everybody lay down, lay down." Unfortunately, it was a stepped hill for cultivation, like this. And we lay down, and I was laid down. I remember I was about to look at some cigarettes in my battle dress pocket, and then all the world went black. I was blown up. If I'd have known what was good for me, I'd have stayed up. Yeah, and I started to shake, and whatever was left in me had been, whatever courage I had left ran out, and I started to stammer and shake, and they took me to this RAP station, and there was an ambulance there, and I never get a terrible sight. The ambulance was about to leave. The doors swung open at the back, and there was a young woman there holding a baby, and I realized it was dead. And her relatives were giving her plates of food, as only the Italians would. And she got in, and then every time we went to the gun lines, I'd jump. And there's a soldier next to me from New Hampshire. He had a bloody bandage on his right arm. And he saw the distress I was in. And he did this divine thing. He put his arm around me and said, there, chum, you'll be all right. I'd like to meet him. I really would like to meet him.
But it was at this time that you had the encounter with the Major?
Oh yes, take your strider off. You're not fit to command men. You see, in World War I, I'd have been shot.
You would?
Yeah, you were shot. For cowardice. Thank God in World War II, it was called battle fatigue, which took the stigma out of it. I wanted to go back to the regiment, but the psychiatrist said, no, Spike, you might let them down. So I didn't go back. I didn't want to live, you know.
It was as black as that, was it?
Yeah.
You ended up in the officers' mess, didn't you?
That's right, as a wine waiter. I had the great pleasure of seeing Field Marshal Alexander fall down the steps of the mess piston. Oh dear, dear.
You stayed on in Italy, didn't you, for a while?
I went and worked at O2E. Now, the O2E, the officers of second echelon, they used to run the war. They posted people here and there. But they had a big band. Soon I was playing with them every night. And it was very, very enjoyable. Because we used to get from the American PX all the latest Glenn Miller arrangements. So we were very on form for our day. And then I had the idea of why don't we all wear white jackets, go to a tailor in Naples. So they made the whole band with white jackets and we looked very smart. The brigadier in charge of O2E said I used to play too loud. So I told him to dance further away. So he had me posted to the CPA, Central Pool of Artists, and from there we went on doing concerts, you know, and then we were doing one tour and we had to pick up some girls from the Albergo Rabonici. And as I was standing outside the coach arguing with a chap selling watches, and a little voice, very tiny voice, said, "How much you pay for that?" So I looked up, and there was the love of my life. There was my dream. It was Maria Antoinetta Pontoni, and we fell in love. One of those great loves. You know, an absolutely beyond description.
Yeah.
We couldn't be without each other. Fortunately, we're travelling together on this tour, and I saw her every night dancing Ponchielli's ballet. And we used to go for walks in the daytime. Like this, she used to buy me ice cream, things like that. She bought me a silk scarf, things like that. I still got it.
Did you ever contemplate marrying her?
Do you know what? We went to live together on Capri, and there was nobody there. And I've described it in my book, what it was like. It was like living on froth. It was just no depth to it. It seemed to go on forever. Yeah. It was wonderful. Still is wonderful.
You keep in touch with her?
Yeah. I go and see her in Rome, and sometimes I see her in Paris, where she visits her daughter. She was the wife of the ambassador for South American country, Argentina, I think. He's dead now. Well, they buried him.
You better be.
Make sure.
When did you start to perform comedy?
By chance, I used to play a very good guitar like Django Reinhardt, and there was a violin player, a virtuoso, a jazz, called Bill Hall. He played every bit as good as Grappelli, and we became the rage of the soldier shows. We used to dress up in rags and do jokes in between. That was the first time I did comedy. Sensational. I can hear that applause ringing in my ears, yes.
And when did you first start to develop an act of your own?
I certainly went on in a different way. I used to appear in the evening dress, but with carpet slippers. And I used to bounce around the back of the stage. Didn't come on the centre stage, just across the back. Do, 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 do. Ooh, do, 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 do. I gradually circled the whole stage and then got to the microphone. And I said, I must be a great disappointment to you all. I used to wonder why I didn't get much work.
You're hopping around like a kangaroo.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I certainly was original.
Remind me of some of the acts you used to have to follow when you went out on Variety.
Well, there was one specific one. It was called Lion-O and Lena. And there was this lion, and they do all the tricks, jumping through flaming hoops and all this stuff. God knows why. They were dressed as cowboys. Oh dear. And that's the garish thing you'd get in Variety. And then it was my turn to come on, and the curtain would come down, and I should hear this sort of strange struggle going on behind the curtains. And apparently the last act of this lion act, they said throw a large chunk of meat onto the woman's chest, and the lion would eat it. Apparently they were trying to get this meat back for the second house. What can you say?
You can't. When did you start to visualize in your mind a thing called the Goon Show?
Well, it was just on a sheet of paper. A series of, well, it was sharing out with Harry Seacombe, Benteen and Sellers. There's funny lines like, I played the Palladium. I've never heard it played better. The band laughed. The band laughed, but not the audience. Thank God for that band. They laughed every time. Because we were into their humour, band humour, yeah. Like Ronnie Scott, we went to see a classical concert, and it was Beethoven's Funeral March. So we were listening to it, and it went on and on and on. In the end, Ronnie Scott couldn't stand it any longer. He said, "This bloke must have lived fucking miles from the cemetery."
The three main characters you played were Eccles, Moriarty,
And Minnie Bannister. And he's fallen in the water.
and there must be a story behind that.
We were on a P&O liner, and we were sailing home, and the crew had put up a canvas swimming pool, and my brother, who was about 6, he was trying to swim and using a rope that hung from the middle of the canvas and swinging to the side and back again. And he missed once and went to the bottom. And a little girl saw him and ran to somebody and said, "He's fallen in the water." So it was based upon that, yes.
The show became quite a strain on you, and we must talk about that.
The strain was in the groin. And yes, it came too much for me. That I was pressurizing myself to make these scripts exquisite examples of contemporary humour. And I was doing it, but it's taking it out of me. Yeah. And I went into Muswell Hill Psychiatric Home.
Is that when you first confronted manic depression, Spike?
Yeah. Yes, it was, yes.
Can you describe what that is like for us, please?
It's like not being alive. It's like not being alive. It's empty. Nothing. Just this terrible pain. Psychic sort of pain. Would be in your head mostly. Yes.
Can you visualize an end to it?
Yes, I've reached an end. I'm on lithium. I stopped it. After all those years.
Was writing itself therapeutic?
Compulsive. I couldn't stop. Yes, I had to go to the office every day and type. And I seem to have done it very successfully. It's after, yes, we broke the mould, you know. We didn't know we were doing it. But happily went on our way, not realizing we were making a whole in comedy.
You've also written many wonderful books. How did Pacoon come about?
My father had a study, and he had a typewriter, and I was seized with the desire to prove to him that I was an Irish novelist with quality, yes? So I wrote it, straight off like that. And there's a copy in his coffin.
You also rewrote the Bible, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I dig him, Jesus. I'd like to meet him. I think his most beautiful gift to the world was his Last Supper, which he said, "Just a minute, lads, I've got something to say here." And he broke this piece of bread. He said, "This is my body, and this is my blood. Go thou and do likewise." And then he saw Judas, and he said to the manager, "Separate checks, please." But But I think they overdid it with him doing these miracles, you know. I don't think he walked underwater. He'd have bloody drowned. You can't walk on water. And those loaves and the fishes, you can't get 5 fish into a multitude of 5,000. You can't do it. Sort of Tommy Cooper, just like that.
Magician's tricks.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Your great friend Alan Clare, the musician, once said that Spike is 2 people. One of them is the most wonderful human being in the whole world, and the other one I avoid like the plague. What did he mean by that?
Well, I think he's just about right. I am 2 people. Yes, I am. I'm the nicest person in the world. But when I'm angry, I'm very angry. Stamp and shout and all that. You know. Everybody's 2 people. Churchill was 2 people. One was this beneficent presiding genius over the war, and the other was when he was in the dumps with the black dog. He couldn't raise his head. That was the other person that was playing on his mind, yeah. I know that black dog. It's been in my room many times.
To go back to that time when you were finding life so difficult, how important were your children to you?
Oh, I was mad about them. I was just mad about them. I couldn't love them enough. And I still do.
Remind us of their names.
Laura Milligan, Sean Milligan, and Seeley Milligan.
Seeley, that must have.
That's Gaelic. It means she of the white shoulders. Isn't that lovely?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So they are the children of your first marriage?
That's right, yes.
How traumatic was that to you when that broke up?
Oh, terrible. I was on board ship when I got this telegram saying your wife is suing you divorce, you know.
Were you surprised you got the custody of the children?
Yes, I was amazed. That was heartbreaking. I had nightmares because I was a lunatic, see. I wasn't normal. And I was aggressing her, my wife, aggressing her and telling her you're doing things wrong all the time. And she was caught in bed, which apparently was all that matters. If you wanted a real divorce, you catch them in bed. And I caught her in bed. And that did for her.
Is it true that you attempted to take your own life?
Yes, I did. I think it was a token one, though. I was aboard this ship and I got the doctor to give me a bottle of tablets. Forget what they were. And then they could knock you off. But I only went into a coma. And as luck would have it, this doctor came in while I was in this coma and pumped me out. Yeah. Wasn't it a little bit of luck? Yeah, no, I think that was a token suicide. She was a wonderful woman. Still is a wonderful woman. Nothing wrong with her at all. It was me.
Tell me about Paddy, your second wife.
She was the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. And her voice like a dream. She was trained to sing Mozart, you know. Oh, 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 oh. Yes, and a terrible thing to die of cancer and leave a daughter of 11. And I timed it so I didn't tell Jane her mother was dying until the night she died. But then she said, "But I'm only 11, Daddy. No, she'll be better by Christmas." Yeah. She's turned out to absolute replica of her mother. Yeah.
Did the children have an influence on your writing, Spike?
Yes, my sister Laura's bigger than me and lifts me up quite easily. I can't lift her. I've tried and tried. She must have something heavy inside. And the best one was the knock on the door, the toilet door. I said, "Who's there?" And the voice said, "It's somebody else." I suddenly realized that we are all somebody else. Yeah.
Now, when did you first realize that there were too many people in this world?
I think when I got up one day and walked into somebody.
But India was the place, I would have thought. You must have...
Yes.
The teeming hordes.
It's appalling, really. It's actually, in the next couple of years, it's going to outnumber China. And it's a human disaster that's coming our way.
So how do you feel about the number of children you've had?
I'm terrible.
You couldn't justify yourself.
It's a love affair. You get seduced by them. They're there and you can't resist them. They're the tender trap. I'm at fault. I realized that every one of my child has got a motor car. And I used to moan about the traffic jams. But suddenly I realized I put 4 motor cars on the street in front of me. What was I moaning about? I had no reclaim. That had no reclaim to anything.
During the 70s, it's on record that you had a son by another woman while you were still married to your second wife.
That's right, yes.
Did that have a great strain upon you?
Well, I didn't know she didn't take any... I did not know she wanted to conceive. She wasn't taking any precautions. She's in Mallorca now.
And is her life a happy one?
It's her life. Well, I send him money monthly, so he's not without money.
Who knew at the time?
He comes and stays with me.
Oh, he does?
Yeah, goes to dinner with me. One trouble with him, he doesn't play rugby.
Does he play any sport?
Bloody football. That's a game for puffs. You know, when a footballer gets tapped on the ankle, they bring on the ambulance on the field, put him in the box.
Who knew at the time when your son was conceived and born?
Who?
Who knew at the time?
Well, she had some friends.
You kept it a secret for a long time.
No, I didn't think about it.
Yeah.
I think, what can I do? He's up in Newcastle. I can't come and spend a weekend with him. I've got my own weekend family here. I had made my own cross, and I was on it. But it's been solved now.
How old was he, Spike, when you first met him?
Oh, about 17.
And what is his name?
James.
Anna Milligan, in spirit?
Well, I've given him the name James Milligan. Yes, yes.
You're now married for a third time.
Oh, a wonderful wife.
How does she put up with you?
She gets pissed sometimes.
Where did you meet Sheila?
She came to my office as a temporary typist, and that's how I met her.
When you look back on your life, what do you see as your greatest success?
Being a good father. That. And I'm going on being a good father.
And how do you define that, being a good father? How do you know you have succeeded?
Just ever so protective of every part of a child, from the time they're born to the time they're teenagers and grow up. And I'm still in love with them. And they come down and stay with me for the weekends and bring the grandchildren. Grandchildren. God, they're terribles. I have to lock myself in a room before they get at me. They would dismantle me, piece by piece. I said to Callum, Callum, how old are you? He said, 3. Still. How about that for an answer?
Let me ask you, Spike, how would you sum up Spike Milligan in his 80th year?
Well, I don't have any observation point, you see. I just am me, that's all, and I've never had a very big showbiz ego. So when the people say, they actually call me a genius. Well, if I am, I did not know it. I did not know that. I don't know what genius means. I know Beethoven's a genius, I know that, yeah.
Not a big ego, but a big nose. How would you like to be remembered?
Well, I'd just like to be remembered, that's all.
Thank you, Spike.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That'll be £1.
Right.